Hello, everyone. We are live. This is episode 7 of Rocket Lab, weekly Rocket Lab. I always. So, yeah,
All the same.
exactly.
Rocket Lab. As long as things go into space, we're good.
If we're not going to space, it's a racket.
That'll just be a multi-level marketing scheme, and we should just close up shop.
Astra, if they go bankrupt, they need to change the name to Rocket Lab.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good. So today is a fantastic day, a historic day, as Starship did a successful test flight. And I thought that we can cover this with Matt. And then there is some other, I want to cover, so the test flight itself, what that has to do with Rocket Lab, and then some Rocket Lab related space news. And excitement is guaranteed. So Matt, did you see the launch and what did you think?
Of course, yeah. I always watch these things. I always get really teary-eyed. Like I get really emotional with launches. I don't know what it is. The Rocket Lab one's not so much anymore.
I thought it was just me. Okay.
Yeah, like something about it, man. Like maybe in a different life, I helped put people on the moon. I know actually my grandfather helped design some electrical components to put stuff on the moon, but he worked for, I don't know if he was working for IBM or GE at the time, but either way, so that's kind of cool. But that engineering, deep-seated like love for just space exploration, I maybe not as much of a nutso like some of the other folks on YouTube, but it does definitely get me emotional seeing that sort of stuff. And it used to be very emotional to watch even the Rocket Lab like Electron launches. Now it's more like usual to me, but seeing these big historic launches it was really fun. Like the first time I saw the Falcon 9 land on its own, that was very emotional. The first time I watched the Starship, this time when I watch the Starship, it's all pretty emotional stuff. I think that just that ground like underlying need for exploration in the world just I think rings true for everybody. So that's why I always get super emotional.
Yeah, it's the same for me. And it's like we're guys, and you're not supposed to get emotional. And I'm glad that you have the balls to talk about it, and I have the cojones to mention it. But for me, it's also that I read so many books of what goes into making a rocket, and especially like where I get, like, for example, every time I watch the Falcon, like the fourth Falcon 1 launch, where SpaceX was almost bankrupt, and I know the backstory that there is all these 20-year-olds who were like away from their families on this like stupid tropical island, and they were being eaten by the bugs, working like 20-hour days, making the impossible happen. And then you see this rocket fly, and then they basically open a new era in space, and it's just like the achievement and the teamwork, and I don't know what it is. But I thought let's watch the launch together, just from the final 10 seconds, and then let's see what happens, because it's such a historic thing, and I just love seeing this. And if I do it, most probably the audience loves seeing it. And then I want to go into what this means for the space industry and then for Rocket Lab. So here we go. I hope the sound is on.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have the bus. Keep the pitching down range.
Chamber's pressure nominal.
Yeah, it's just so crazy how long that tail is.
We are 2 plus 40 seconds into the flight of Starship.
33 Raptor engines
Acquisition
powering the
booster
first
range
stage.
power and telemetry nominal.
We've heard power and telemetry nominal call out. We're heading downrange over the Gulf of Mexico. Net call out tells us Starship is through the period of greatest stress on the way to space. Now, the next major event is hot staging in just over 90 seconds from now. To get ready, the booster will shut down all but 3 of the Raptor engines. Flames holding the 2 stages together will release, and the Starship's second stage will ignite its engines. Starship will then separate from the Super Heavy booster and head to space. And at the same time, the 3 engines that are still firing on Super Heavy will flip the booster around. 10 more engines will ignite for the boost back burn, putting the first stage on path for a splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico.
I wish.
Engine power continues to look nominal on 33 Raptor engines. We're about to shut down the first stage and perform staging. Let's watch and listen.
And acquisition of signal Houston and New Orleans.
Booster engine cut off. Stage separation.
Boost back startup.
Ship engine ignition.
You're hearing the cheering. The first ever successful hot stage for SpaceX's Starship.
Incredible views of our Super Heavy booster. And
And
as you
boom.
can see, the Super Heavy booster has just experienced a rapid.
Yeah. Womp womp.
Womp.
But it was pretty cool, right? Like the thing that I think was most good to hear, at least from after watching it, was hearing that the pad was okay. So at least the reinforced concrete and everything that they did. So it seems like maybe we'll get a little bit more rapid testing and seeing a lot more Starship launches in the future, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Johnny Mac, I don't know why it makes me feel intense pride, even though I had nothing to do with it. It's the same with me. I don't know what it is. I'm like so proud of SpaceX, and I'm not from the US. I have nothing to do with it, not an investor, but it's such an incredible freaking feat of engineering. It's unbelievable. And it's like when it goes up, it's like you think it's like a skyscraper, and then you're like, this is like a glitch in the matrix, like it shouldn't work, and yet it goes
looks
up.
like it looks like CGI. Yeah.
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 So I'm curious about your thoughts. A little bit of statistics. I was rewatching the SpaceX feed, and the most powerful rocket before this one was the Saturn V, and this one is 3.5 times as powerful. The Falcon 9 can take 17 tons to orbit, and this one can take 250. So it's more than a magnitude. So it's like increase. And then apparently they said something that once they optimize the hot staging fully, it will be like 300 and something tons. So it's like almost a 20x increase compared to Falcon 9, which is insane. And they were talking about the different engineering feats that they are doing to make it like insanely rapidly reusable. And I kept thinking to myself, like, is this good or bad for Rocket Lab? And yeah, like, how does this affect the space industry? And should we be happy or sad as Rocket Lab investors?
Well, I just want to touch specifically, like I don't live too far away from Clear Lake, which is where they have the Johnson Control Center, which is where they're, when they always say Houston, right? I live in Houston. And so, having that Johnson Control Center, I've been able to see that. They also have a Saturn V mock-up on its side in the building. They also have a few of like the historic kind of first rockets that they put into space. So it's really cool. But the thing specifically about the Saturn V, which you kind of alluded to, which is like the 17 ton of payload capacity versus what we're going after now. The Saturn V is this rocket that is one massive. If you stand next to it, I should pull them up on my phone. I have pictures on my phone, so maybe one of these times I can walk us through it. But it's like this entire rocket pulls up this entire building, and at the very end, you just see like this, maybe like 1/10 or maybe 5% of the entirety of the rocket is just the capsule that they put all the people in to be able to send them to space and to the moon. And so it's pretty crazy to see like how much excess waste there is, and having that ability to have that other 90 to 95% of that space system or space vehicle be reusable, I'm sure will reduce the cost immensely. And that's obviously dragging us into the modern day space systems as we're kind of looking at it with Starship Heavy, hopefully being a reusable rocket, with Neutron eventually being a reusable rocket. And then the Electron to be not reusable, but refurbished, right? To be able to be used in lowering costs for everybody. But if you look at the size and scale of how big the Starship is and how big the Saturn V is and how much weight is actually 17 tons, right? You're talking about 35,000 pounds. You're talking about, I guess close to 1,700 kilograms, right? At that point, that's a lot of mass. And so do you actually need to utilize all that? Or is it something along the lines of, 750 kilograms, which is more of like an Electron, right? That's kind of where I try to understand, how much people are actually trying to use. And so I think it's in this space at the moment, it's hard to kind of tell because all the launches are so few and far between. And I think the only one that has very consistent launches is really the Falcon 9, and a majority of that is for Starlink. But as we grow into the latter half of the decade, I feel like you're going to have a lot more people that are going to want to have these meta constellations up in the air, and having that entry price of say 40, 50 million is going to be very tough. Now, if Starship is able to get their costs down immensely, then of course I think that that's going to put a big hindrance on Rocket Lab. But I still think that it's going to be an order of magnitude or two in order to get on, say, like a Starship or Falcon Heavy versus the Electron. And so just like how we talked about how Neutron is going to be probably a $30-40 million price tag as well. So it's tough to say, but even still, you need a duopoly or even a triopoly, 2 or 3 different companies to really be able to be competitive in the space. And so I think it's too early to tell in terms of is say Rocket Lab doomed. I think that, if anything, it's good to see all these people trying to do something that was really led by the privatization of space in the United States in 2013, when Obama really kind of put that end to NASA putting things into space and really making everything kind of privatized. And I think in order to really see, it's going to take 5 to 10 years additional to really see all these other companies come out of the woodwork. Like when you saw Astra report on Monday, they didn't even really give out any earnings results. It was just like, this is what the total addressable market is and stuff like that. So you have all these clowns, and I shouldn't say that. That's kind of too harsh. But you have all these people that are still trying to keep up this dream and have yet to really succeed at all. And I'm sure there's going to be several that, really surpass and be able to bring some ingenuity and innovation to the space that do come through. But then you're gonna have all these people that are marketing just for the dollar bills that don't truly actually have the passion like Elon, the passion like Peter Beck, that did it before it was even profitable, did it before it was even
A thing.
a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to say it. So I think that you'll have somebody that comes through and really does good with innovation and stuff. But for the time being, I think that these are the companies that are really going to help out. And I think that you also have a large revenue stream, not just on launch, but the space systems. And I think Rocket Lab has a really good advantage with the space systems, to which SpaceX has even used on the Psyche mission, some of the Solero products. And I think that NASA has been really pleased with some of those, and all the other people that have utilized the Photon for satellites and stuff like that have been relatively pleased as well. So I think next year we're going to go up to like $70 million a quarter for space systems. So that's nothing to scoff at. That's it's multiples of magnitudes more revenue than Astra even gets in a single year. So
in all its existence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this will open new frontiers to space, because exactly as you said, that on the Saturn V, you had this huge rocket, and then you had this small capsule. And I realized that with the Starship, like, it's the first time that you can take tons and tons and tons. Like, you don't have I mean, you have a limit, but it's like before, like, the engineers would have to, like, I don't know, even if they're taking a sandwich to space, they would have to check it with NASA if it like fits on the ship, right? And then now the limit is not that insane. Like like I was thinking, like, building a base on the moon, like you can take, like, what did they say, that if you reload the Starship in orbit, like refuel it, you can take another like 200 tons to the moon, or, you know, and 200 tons, that's like a lot of supplies. Like, suddenly it really unlocks I don't want to say space as in, you know, like around the Earth, but it unlocks like outer space for actual colonies. And I was thinking, for example, you know, the James Webb Space Telescope was super delayed, super costly, because they had to like origami fit it into like a rocket that fit it, right? And I was Googling before this show that the Starship would comfortably fit the James Webb Telescope open, like fully open. We could just launch, because the Starship is 9 meters in diameter, and James Webb was 6.5 meters, you know? So it's like, on science, it's going to open new fronts, because you can maybe, you know, have a telescope that is 3-4 times as big as the James Webb, because now we have the technology how to origami it together, you know? Or you can just quickly make telescopes and that are even bigger than James W and JST. I don't know what's so hard. Okay, James Webb. And I think it's and so I think overall this is very good for space and space industry, and maybe some of these new things, supplies and telescopes, are going to have Rocket Lab logos and things in them. So in that way, it can be good to Rocket Lab. And then if they really become super rapidly reusable, right? So that means that they will be a very heavy competitor to Rocket Lab. But I have two viewpoints on this. One of them is Musk is so freaking focused on Mars that I think that having a colony on Mars is going to take up all the factory capacity for the next decades. So like, you only make starships to basically go to Mars. And then I heard, I heard rumors that they, like, if Starship is working, they're basically 100% going to quit the Falcon 9 program. And it wouldn't surprise me, because SpaceX they have a cash cow in Starlink. They're trying to get to Mars, and it wouldn't surprise me if they would like quit launching satellites, or really like lose focus on it, you know, which could be potentially really, really good for Rocket Lab. Number one. Number two is the Starship is such a big rocket that for very many satellites, like, unless you're shooting up satellite constellations, it's an overkill. Like, it's like having a truck deliver your pizza, you know? and so overall, I think that this is, I would say it's more good for Rocket Lab than bad.
Sorry, I was reading and I was on mute. I agree. I think it is better for the industry as a whole. It's propelling us forward. It's propelling everybody forward. Innovation always helps, right? And so you see people come out with something new, navigation systems in cars, right? And next thing you know, it might be the premier thing for one car to have it. And somebody might say, oh, I'm going to choose this car today. And then in 5 years, every car has it, right? Just like the exceptional range that you're seeing some of these EV cars. It's like, and I think eventually it's going to get back to what's the purpose. And, everyone's kind of fighting. Initially, when these electric cars were coming out, they might have had a 100-mile range or a 25-mile range. Like 10, 15 years ago, 25-mile range was kind of the thing. And then the car would turn into a hybrid. And then it got to a 100-mile range, and then it became a hybrid. And now it's fully electric, right? And Elon even said it in his most recent podcast with, I think it was Joe Rogan or somebody else. It was just like, well, do you really want 600-mile range? Like, how often are you going to use that, right? Where you're just towing around excess weight of this battery. Maybe that's 200% larger than it really needs to be. And you really have to think, like, what capacity you're going to use it. Now, if you're driving, like, let's say a Tesla semi, 1,000-mile battery is probably more prudent to have than, but at any given time, are you really going to be able to drive, 1,000 miles in a day or 600 miles in a day? Have you ever driven that? I mean, that's a long time. I've driven, I'd say the most I've driven in a day is about 800 miles, and it's tough. So it's very tough to do that. And even still, you're going to have some sort of stopping point.
I was going to say, like, you wouldn't want to do it nonstop. Like,
Exactly. So that's kind of the thought process, is like, are you over designing some of these things where, exactly what you said, do you want a semi trailer delivering your pizza? Like, it's about really the needs and having that optionality. And, if Apple needs to launch up 40 satellites, they'll go with a SpaceX. But if they need to do it, on a smaller scale, or if Amazon needs to do it on a smaller scale.
To be honest, it seems like Apple and Musk have a feud right now going on. And it might be that because like Amazon is not going to launch on SpaceX. That's 100%. So
and you already have the Apple Global Star deal, which they're starting to, and we'll start to get satellites up and running in the first half of next year. So
exactly where I think that the Starship will be unbeatable is if you need to shoot up like 150, 200 satellites in a constellation in one go. Like, yes, it will be, I think it will not be a comparison between Neutron, right? But I think for sending up individual satellites, like even if it's not small sets, like even if it's like what the Falcon 9 would have taken up, I think that the Neutron will be better than Starship for a long time, because Peter Beck said it once, that Elon Musk is saying that the fuel cost of the rocket will be $2 million, so the launch will be very, very cheap, right? And then Peter Beck was saying that's kind of disingenuous to say, because it's not only fuel cost that you have, like you have the pad cost, you have all the personnel that is there, you have to refurbish something. So I think that, yes, once you have a cadence of the Starship coming down and being able to refly within like 3 hours, then the pad cost and the personnel and all these things is completely negligible. But I think that that's not happening for decades, and I think that for Starship, like, they will need to start very expensive, because I'm not even sure that the first Starship, like once they start taking paying customers, I'm not even sure that it's going to be reusable, because they will try to just land it like how they did with Falcon 9. I think it took 17 tries or something to try to land.
That'll take some time.
Yeah,
it'll take some time. Just like Neutron's going to have to go through the same journey, right? And I'm very curious to see what happens with that. And that the evolution of that. And somebody was mentioning, do you even think that Neutron could be happening in 2024? I think fourth quarter will be very telling with that. I know there was a few milestones that they wanted to achieve prior to the end of 3Q, and like the Rutherford, the Archimedes engine testing, and several other items that they really wanted to get off. I'm very curious, but I think that what you kind of brought up before we even went live was this new facility that we purchased or got from a Rocket Lab standpoint. I mean, in Maryland. I'm not buying anything. I'm too poor, but yeah, this opportunity that is here specifically focusing towards Neutron, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, this was going to be our next topic, and you were already bringing it up that it looks like Rocket Lab acquired a Northrop Grumman. I can't speak
Perfect.
tonight.
You did great.
Yeah.
You did great.
Okay, good. So they acquired this factory, apparently, maybe not. Yeah, I think the factory has been in operation since 1929, or the state has had. Did I?
Yeah, no, the article's right there, the little more piece, and it said exactly that it's been kind of handed down from company to company. It's been part of several major innovations and movements in the space industry, like you said, since 1929. Let me call a few others out. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it helped. It's a old Lockheed Martin building, 113,000 square foot, manufacturing since 1929. It's helped with many company spacecraft buses, the Photon lunar spacecraft that delivered Capstone project in NASA in 2022. So several other things, and it's really going to be the piece that helps solidify the Neutron going forward.
Yeah. But by the way, to jump back to the Starlink launch, I was also thinking about this, what Francisco Ramirez is saying. What do you think Jeff Bezos is thinking about this? That you have SpaceX that was started 1 or 2 years later than Blue Origin, and they are basically at the cusp of being profitable, and they have the Falcon 1 orbital rocket, which they discontinued, the Falcon 9, the Falcon Heavy, and now basically Starship. I think you could say it's an orbital vehicle, because I know that this launch was basically suborbital. They weren't targeting to go into orbit, but as far as I understand, it was on purpose, and it was nicely in orbit until it also got blown up.
Yeah. And
Blue Origin is like, I don't know where they are. They're like MIA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk poorly upon Jeff because he's done some phenomenal things, right? But I think it just goes into the expertise, right? I mean, Jeff is a phenomenal business mind, and he is a really good person of being able to know how to choose leaders to bring things to fruition. But that might take longer time versus like you have Elon, who's literally sleeping on the floor in probably some of these facilities and could probably give you the equation or know exactly how to operate some of these things or make them come to fruition himself. So, I mean, they're both obviously brilliantly rich, more than $100 billion a piece. And so, and in Elon's case, over 200 billion. I'm not sure after the divorce if Jeff is still above 200 billion or not, but they're still both wildly successful. I just think that the reason why you'll have a little bit of an oomph ahead for Elon is because of his ability to literally be hands-on in the process versus Jeff. I think it's more of a pet side project, right? I don't think he has as much, although he's talked about how his like underlying feeling has always been about space exploration and stuff of the like. I don't think he's sleeping in the factories, and maybe he does. Maybe it just hasn't been outlined as much. But I think that if you were to say put them head to head, I don't want to say an IQ test because they both have different IQs, right? Jeff might have a better business IQ than Elon, and Elon might have a better operational or engineering IQ than Jeff. But as an operator in actually getting things down and building things, I think that that's why you're probably seeing, several years ahead and what SpaceX is doing versus Blue Origin. And I'm not exactly sure what Blue Origin's total MO is. I mean, are they trying to land things on the moon? Are they trying to go to Mars? And that might be part of it as well. If you don't have a clear vision, you're always going to have people prioritizing things inappropriately. And that's one thing that I've experienced in business is, if you line out things appropriately, it allows you to eliminate waste very easily. And so you have these side projects that might be going on at Blue Origin that might be pulling away from what the main objective is, versus we know what the main objective of SpaceX is, right? Everything that they do is in order to get to Mars, in order to be interplanetary. So that is like unwavering. Versus Blue Origin, I'm like, what's going on exactly?
Isn't it that they want this? What is it called? Like they want to establish habitat off Earth, and
oh, you mean Blue Origin, or?
Yeah, Blue Origin. Yeah. Sorry,
I've seen Jeff talk about that, but it hasn't been nearly as publicized as much. And maybe people just like talking about Elon more than Jeff. But I know exactly what you mean. This like large space station that spins on an axis, so that way, you can feel the sense of gravity and things of the like. Yeah,
it's so funny because somebody commented here that the best guy is Peter Beck, and it's so interesting because if you look at the comparison, like you have two people who have like in the hundreds of billions, right? And then we say that one of them is an engineering manufacturing genius, which is Elon, and Jeff is he's a money genius, like he can throw money at the problem, right? And then you have Peter Beck, who is like, he didn't even have the money. Like he's just an engineering genius, and he's doing definitely better than Blue Origin, in my opinion. Like, yeah, and it's actually really, really amazing if you think about it. Like, I think he doesn't get enough credit for what he has done. Yeah, the O'Neill cylinder. Thank you, Danny Gauthier. Probably butchered your name. That's what it's called.
The O'Neill cylinder, yeah.
So I'm curious about one thing. So I when I first read this article that they bought a new factory, my initial reaction was like, oh no, like for two reasons. Like one is, is this draining the cash reserves of the company? And then number one is like, why do you need a factory in New Zealand, in California, in in all these places in the States? And I'm like, are we like spreading too thin? And how come, like, why isn't it just easier to expand existing factories so that you like somehow simplify your supply chain? And that was my two initial thoughts. Then I read the article a bit more, and I see that this is very close to Wallops, and it's to support neutron operations. So I'm sure that there is good operational sense, and I mean, it's Peter Beck that we're talking about. But are you in any way worried that Rocket Lab is on a shopping spree and buying too many factories in too many states, and we are being spread too thin?
Yes and no. I think that my initial thought is kind of what your thought is which is, is this kind of what Peter Beck warned against in the 3Q earnings, where he's like, I don't want to run before we can truly walk. And I think that what he was kind of talking about is they want to go from one launch to two launches to 5 launches and then slowly over time. And it seems like with this, and it seems like with the Long Beach acquisition that they did for Virgin Orbit and stuff like that, it seems like they're starting to get more to a place where they're trying to run a little bit. And my fear is exactly your thought, but I recognize that this is specifically for Neutron. And I know that Neutron, there's going to be a lot of inefficiencies if they're trying to build a Neutron rocket out of Long Beach. And they're not going to be building any Neutrons in New Zealand. New Zealand is strictly going to be Electron. And then Launch Pad 2 is only going to be strictly Electron. And then Launch Pad 3, which is in Wallops as well as Launch Pad 2. Launch Pad 3 is going to be strictly, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Just want to say it's not just Neutron, it's also space systems.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I don't know where other than Long Beach in New Zealand where they build. I know they also have some facilities in New Mexico as well. So I think that maybe having a good investor day this year or later next year would be useful to kind of understand what facilities do what. And like you, I'm starting to get a little bit lost, and I recognize that it's a $2 billion company, right? I mean, there's going to have a lot of facilities associated with it, with a lot of people where you're like, is that really necessary? But at the same time, you know, they're the ones that are rocket scientists, right? They're the ones that are getting things up into space. But I agree with you. It's kind of like, is this the appropriate time, or is it, because it doesn't seem like bootstrapping anymore? And that's kind of what Peter said, was they want to bootstrap. You know?
Yeah, but how do you, I mean, you can't bootstrap building satellites, right? Like you know, I have this exact problem in my company in Sweden, because I'm a real estate developer, and this business needs so much capital, and then we are trying to bootstrap as effing much as possible. But for example, when you have to submit plans to the city, and the city asks you for fire drawings and you know, ventilation drawings and handicap drawings, like you have to hire engineers. Like I cannot sit down and go to Fiverr and hire a Filipino guy to do it, because it has to be a guy who knows the Swedish rules. You know, he has the correct Swedish papers. And yeah, on these space satellites, like think about it, like you can iterate on a rocket, right? But like on the satellite, it's like once it's in space, it's in space. Like you're not gonna fix it. You're not gonna like.
So to go back to what you were saying, you know, is it premature? I think with the ramp up in the space systems business, I think having a thing on the East Coast, like you said, I mean, I'll read for verbatim. Neutron was the last thing they mentioned, and they said, and I quote, "To support its growing composite product line, Rocket Lab is establishing a space structures complex in Middle River, Maryland, which will support the development and manufacture of carbon composite spacecraft buses, structural panels and assemblies, satellite dispensers, aerostructures and heat shields, composite overwrap pressure vessels, solar panel substrates, launch vehicle structures, and more. The site will also play a role in the development and long-term supply of carbon composite structures for Rocket Lab's new medium launch lift vehicle, the Neutron." So that's the last piece, right? It's the Neutron. And so I'm with you. I think they have a robust product line that is continuing to grow, and we're even seeing them go from $30 to $40 million a quarter to $60 to $70 million a quarter in 1Q of next year. And so if they're able to continue that pace, I can understand why, you know, you're acquiring this large facility to help.
Yeah,
and I think there's going to be efficiencies with that as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about also another thing, actually two things that we might not know about. So we don't know how their space systems is doing, right? Like, because I mean, we know that they're in Q1, they're rapidly increasing, but it can be that they're running out of production facilities, and like legitimately they like they need to start running because they're walking. And then the second thing is, which was another thought, that maybe they are doing this, that they're having so many factories in so many states, and it might be a strategy that, because, you know, like if you're in a state, then the senators and congressmen that are there, like they will want to support you to like keep the jobs there, right? And we know that they're going for like a lot of contracts for Neutron. And it could be like a part of a very clever strategy to garner a lot of support from different states. Yeah. Because I guess it's like significantly easier to get a lot of government funding when
if you're able to show the government's and then there's the photo ops, and everyone loves photo ops, right? So
exactly. I mean, if you read this newspaper article, it was like Senator Blah said this, and Senator Blah said this, and all these politicians were there, and this is something that I would love to have come up on an analyst call or something. Like ask them, like, how come you're buying all these factories and not expanding on existing ones, and if you're spreading too thin?
I have a question. So on the, what was this, November 16th, so 2 days ago, they actually released the financial results on the third quarter for Astra. Do you want to go through that really quickly?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to share it? And then
Yeah, let me pull it up here.
Astra is one of this company that I'm surprised every week that they're alive.
This will even help you even more. So on November 16th, which was on Thursday, they announced their financial results for the third quarter. They delivered 8 spacecraft engines out of the Sunnyvale manufacturing facility, and they're expected to be recognized as revenue in the fourth quarter. So that's interesting to hear. They also signed 2 new spacecraft engine customers totaling $12 million in total contract value starting in Q3. But obviously that doesn't necessarily play into the role of Q3 earnings. So GAAP net loss for them was $29.7 million. The adjusted net loss was $27.4. The EBITDA loss was $24.3. They totaled $1.3 million in CapEx for the quarter. They ended with cash and equivalents of $14 million and restricted total cash of $5 million. So no bueno for them. They didn't talk much about.
And you realize that was 1.5 months ago, like the quarter ended, and they have 15 million in the bank, and they burned 24 million last quarter. So they're like on the last fumes. Yeah.
So I mean, I think here's I think a key thing to look at, right? So this is in thousands. So you have $963,000 worth of sales for the first 9 months, $256,000 for the third quarter. No launches. Cost of them to do that was $232 million. So their gross profit was $232,000. So it cost them, they actually made a gross profit of $24,000 as opposed to $1.7 million last year, third quarter. That said, they have a lot of operating expenditures, so the R&D, sales and manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. They have basically $28 million worth of expenses every quarter. The first 9 months of the quarter, $91 million in expenses. And when you think about it, how are you supposed to make any money if your contract values are coming in at 12 million or are coming in at less than 20-30 million dollars, and here you are barely able to make $1 million worth of revenue in the quarter.
Isn't this exactly what Peter Beck was talking about, that he's refusing to sell Neutron until it's a proven rocket, because then you have to discount your flights, and then it kills your cash flows for many years to come before you run off the.
Exactly. So you have a lot of stuff.
Do they have any debt in the company?
Let me see. Accounts payable, senior notes. They have a $7 million note. Current liabilities is $48 million. So yeah, something like $48 million or so.
So they have no income, liabilities on $48 million.
And I'm sure that this is revolving credit, I assume.
Yeah.
8.3 million.
Yeah, it's not a pretty scene. The biggest moat there is getting to space on a rocket. Yeah. Like there's only very few companies that can do it. And Astra doesn't seem to be one of them.
At least last year they had $6 million in launch. They don't even have any. I mean, they've contracted for the first 9 months. They've contracted their revenue stream by 90%.
Yeah,
going from 9.3 million last year to 963 million this year.
960,000.
Sorry, 1,000. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nuts.
So yeah, for those of the people that are like, oh, they're in a bad spot, like, could that be Rocket Lab? It's like, I feel like if you're comparing Astra and Rocket Lab at this point, I think you just need to take a quick look at the balance sheets and the income statements again, because, at least Rocket Lab, they might be burning cash, but they're also making a crap ton of money on a gap basis, right?
Yeah.
From on a gap margin basis, right? So if you're able to increase revenues, at least these guys, they're barely even able to cover their costs. Like, they had $260,000 worth of stuff that they sold, and they barely made a gross profit.
Yeah. And you're so good at segueing, because I actually wanted to go into this interview that Peter Beck did this week. And in that interview, he mentioned at the very end that Rocket Lab is profitable if it's not for the Neutron. So without the Neutron, you would have a gap profitable, sustainable, working, space company. And SpaceX is not profitable yet. So that's a huge. I believe that Rocket Lab would be the only profitable launch company. Maybe you can't say that, because it can also be because of the space system. But yeah, it's as you segued into this, that the fact that they're almost. I mean, Rocket Lab makes real income. They have a real business. They have real cadence. They have real rockets going up. So incomparable.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question here from Johnny Mack. On a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the most bullish, what are your feelings on Rocket Lab in general? I already know Vince is a 10. Yeah, I am.
I mean, I'm an 8, I would say. I think I'm always cautious. I try to always quantify my risks.
But you know why I'm so bullish? Like, because, like, you have to look at the company, right? And there's always risk, right? And then on Rocket Lab, like, I feel that the risk is that they burn up the money and they go bankrupt, right? But I'm like, they are basically, after SpaceX, the second company that has, I mean, okay, not second, but let's say there is ULA, and who else is there that can shoot up rockets? And my point is that I know that NASA has this policy to have multiple vendors. They don't want to have only SpaceX. Like, they don't want basically SpaceX to become the privatized arm of NASA. And that, for me, it even takes that risk away. And because it's proven that Rocket Lab can innovate, they can get products. I feel that the worst thing that can happen is they get severely delayed, but that's it.
Yeah.
And that would mean that we don't get a $20 stock price in the near future, but we get a $10 stock price. And I will not cry myself to yeah.
I think to me, it's like, I think a lot of, there's the thing is, I don't foresee us burning through $375 million worth of cash before Neutron gets on the pad.
Unless we buy full of factories.
Yeah, which I don't really foresee, but I didn't really realize this Maryland one was kind of going on either. But I just don't see how you really can burn through that much cash in a year. I could see you burning $100 to $120 million in 2024. So, but I don't foresee you burning 3 times that. So I think that you still have a lot of run room before you really have to get concerned about the company.
Yeah, and I'm so bullish that I made my daughter buy Rocket Lab. I don't know if I told you
I
this.
saw that. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. That's pretty funny.
So my daughter is 9 years old, and she is incredible at saving her money. She does chores in the house. She gets money, and I try to teach her about money. And like my son, for example, it's like the minute he gets money, he buys toys, he buys candy. It's like he cannot save a cent, But my daughter is like the opposite. And even if she has money and she wants something, then she gets like the grandparents, or she asks like, what do I need to do that you buy this so I don't have to spend my money? So I started telling her that, look, like when you're ready, like I want to talk to you about, investing, because you shouldn't have money sitting on the bank account. And that's actually the correct thing to do. And she came home from school the other day, and she was like, Daddy, I'm ready to learn about investing. What do I need to do? What should I invest my money in? And I was like, okay, I mean, if she's ready, I'm not going to say no. So I told her, yeah, like from the money that you have, like you can buy Rocket Lab shares, And then she was like, what is that? And I was like, yeah, it's a rocket company. And then she was so scared that she's like, but what happens if the price goes down? And I said, yeah, then you lose money. It's like, no, then I'm not doing it. And I was like, okay, honey, if the money goes down, like I will like buy the stocks from you, so you're basically guaranteed to be at zero. And then it's so amazing to watch kids, because we bought it and she was like looking at the phone and it was like 431. Yeah, I made 1 cent. And then it went down to like 429. And then she was like, Dad, what the F? You told me this was a good buy. And I'm like, honey, you need to calm down. Like you're going to have this like probably until you graduate from school. And it doesn't matter what it does in the short term.
Right.
And then then the next day it went up. And then 2 days after that, she came home and she's like, what is Rocket Lab doing? And I showed her like that it was 422. And she was like, what is this? Why did you make me do this? And and it's so funny to see this like childish, unfiltered emotions of this. She needs to learn more about investing and handling the emotions.
I think it seems like most retail investors that we have on X and YouTube anyway. So yeah, it goes down to 1% and they start flailing their arms like crazy people. So
yeah, exactly. So on this last Peter Beck interview, you said that you saw the beginning of it.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, because there was some very, very good tidbits from it. One of them was, but I think all was towards the end. I don't know. Did you get any new?
The stuff that I watched, it was kind of seemed relatively the same. I think they were just applauding him for the transparency that he had in the 3Q earnings about, what the anomaly that happened and being upfront and transparent and showing that to and explaining that to the world. And I think that they were very, appreciative and also very complimentary about how easily he does that, right? Like he obviously knows what's going on, right? He's not having to be coached. He's able to kind of walk through the problem with what happened, and he's not stumbling through it, right? He's able to do it with quite ease. So he's obviously very much in tune with what's going on in the company and how and what actually caused the anomaly. So they were very appreciative of that, but I didn't really get anything that was too crazy from that. And I think I watched like the first half hour of it, and it was just more of the same, kind of walking through the business, introducing people to Peter, which I'm sure a lot of people that watch the NSF, was it NASA spaceflight? Is that what they are?
Yeah.
They all probably pretty much know who Peter Beck is, and so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, because I wasn't able to watch the second half, and you said there was a lot of good nuggets in there.
Yeah, I mean, so one of them was that they are profitable without the Neutron. That was super good. And then the second one was that he reiterated, because they asked, like, where do you see your company in the next many years? And he said that he's trying to build a generational space company. And he said that the rocket launch, it gets all the attention and it's very nice. And it's basically the keys to space, but it's not where his business is going to be. And he basically said that once you have the keys to space, and you know how to manufacture satellites, which they clearly are becoming really good at, then you can build your own infrastructure. And, he's like, that's when you really get rock and rolling. And every time when I hear these in the interviews, I always feel like blue balled, like, yes, he's going to say it. And then, oh, no, like, because I feel that this is like think about it, in none of the valuations of ours or any other YouTube channel that I watch, you have any of this third part of the business, this space infrastructure, and it's supposed to be like 10x of like, I think that once they announce it and they really show some proof, it's going to 10x the value of from where they currently are, right? And yet it's like we cannot model it, we have no data, we don't know when it's coming. It's like a call option on the company.
And I'm curious, what exactly do you think is going to be part of that space infrastructure? Do you think it's going to just be a launch off point for other people to grab supplies from? Like, what exactly do you think it is? Do you think it's going to be an International Space Station replacement?
It's funny. I had that thought, and then I thought that it can also be. I mean, now I'm just throwing ideas. I'm like, what if they would put like internet around the moon? I mean, that's a very small. And then if there is a Mars colony, like you need like satellites over there, but I'm pretty sure that SpaceX would do it. Then I think that they can have their own mega constellation around Earth, but I don't know what it would do, because you already have internet, you already have like Planet Labs taking photos of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the Kuiper Belt by Amazon. Then it can be Space Factory, the one that they are having, because that he actually specifically mentioned in another interview, that he said like people always talking about like up mass, like how much mass can you carry up into orbit, and he's like, you're not talking about down mass. And he said that that's a very interesting subject of how much mass you can get back from space. And he specifically mentioned Varda and the floating space lab. So, but again, I have no clue how to model it, what it would cost.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear about it more. But obviously, if maybe even they don't know, like they just know like we're looking for business opportunities, and we're going to have the rockets, we're going to be able to build the spacecraft, and once the opportunity reveals itself, like we have the components to make it happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that would be curious to. But I'm surprised. Like, why wouldn't people be able to do that more so on like the ISS now? Like, I'm just curious why they wouldn't be able to contract that out already. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't work, right? I'm just thinking, what makes it different than the ISS? Is it because you have to get the state involved? Is it because...
Yeah, I'm sure. And the ISS has, I guess, limited space. It's going away within a year or something. It will deorbit soon.
Yeah, I don't know when it's supposed to. It's sooner than we think, I think.
Yeah. Because it's also, how do you call it? Like, it's not humans manufacturing it, right? So I don't see why you would need to attach it to.
Let's see. It says at least 2030. Yeah, 2031. Yeah.
Really? I don't know where I got this 2024 datum from.
There's Russian Space Agency will leave in 2024. Yeah, everything I'm seeing is 2031.
Yeah, I mean, then it is 2031.
But even still, like, you have to think like how big of a the ISS actually isn't that big, believe it or not. Like, a lot of it is solar panels, a lot of it is, and so maybe that is piece of it, is maybe they're working with NASA to figure out the replacement of it, and that's what they're going to help with is that replacement of the ISS, because a lot of I told you we've been into Clear Lake, and we do some underwater testing as well in the oil and gas industry, and so I've been to some of these NASA facilities, not necessarily for space, but for renting out part of the pools that they test things in, just because we also do the stuff underwater remote operated vehicle testing and stuff of the like. And so I've been to some of these pools where they do some of the ISS testing, right? Where they will have like a fully embedded model in the pool. And so what better way to test things on Earth than an underwater? And so they have like
it's a life-size model.
Yeah, they have like basically a full-size replica of the ISS, and it's really small. It fits in it's not a small pool by any means. It's a huge pool, but it's indoors in a massive warehouse, basically facility, and it's very clean, right? So it's not dirty or anything like that. But you're like, oh, that's really it, like that, and people are like, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the majority of what you would expect the ISS to be, you expect it to be so huge, and when you look at it on like a scale, it is huge, but you have to think of how much power and everything you need to be able to power the whole thing. And a lot of it is just excess like solar panels and stuff like that. So if you're able to figure out a way to have way more mass with way less solar panels, which would probably be where Rocket Lab comes in with Solero, right? I mean, they're probably one of the better, if not the best, solar panel space solar panel creators at the moment. So having that is obviously probably paramount to what the upcoming ISS does. And maybe NASA isn't even planning on it being an international space station. Maybe it's just a US space station as well. So I'm kind of curious. I'm just thinking out loud.
What do you think that their space infrastructure could be?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, immediately when you were talking about it, I was thinking about Varda and how they want to have the ability to kind of do these zero-G space systems, space experiments, and have the ability to do that. But it could be to house astronauts. But the problem that I foresee at the moment is that would require two big things to come into play. It's a space, it's a living space sort of facility, which is yet to be announced. It's been kind of hinted at. And then second, the ability to launch people into space, which with Neutron you will be able to do. I feel like you'll have the lifting capability to do that. And I think the way.
But would you? Because it's funny, like theoretically, because when he talks about the space infrastructure, he says that like you're selling space as a service, right? So let's say that the government needs a space station where scientists can go and conduct experiments, right? And what if he would say, like, guys, we have a space station and you can rent it from us. It will be $5 million a month, or I don't know, like $100 million a month. Let's say that's probably a more. And then if Rocket Lab can make the math on, okay, like if we shoot up these things and they assemble themselves, but then the astronauts can be taken up by another launch provider. It doesn't have to be Rocket Lab because they're renting the facility, like in space, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, though, like it's my lack of knowledge of the industry. If you were to ask me who provides solar panels for space, the only person I'd be able to tell you is Rocket Lab.
Solero, yeah.
Yeah. So that's just I know they're not the only player in town, but I mean, to me, I think that they're integrating themselves into a company that is almost necessary for the continuation of the space industry. It might not be from a launch perspective, but I think that Neutron will eventually launch people into space. I think if you just look at the way that, I don't know. I have a feeling that Neutron will eventually launch people into space. It has the lifting capability to do so. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody commented to me, the space infrastructure sounds simply like a place for whatever space market becomes in the future. It doesn't sound like they mean anything concrete by it. Yeah, I agree. Like it could be that the reason why we never seem to get an update on this is because they themselves don't know. Like the opportunity hasn't presented itself. They just know that once the opportunity comes, they know how to shoot up stuff. They know how to manufacture spacecraft. They know how to operate it from Earth, and they will be ready. And it's like a call option for us on the stock. Like whenever it happens, it's going to be amazing for the stock. And the valuation just for the space systems and the rockets is really fair and good. Like even if this never happens.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that I see, I think this can be like in closing, is like I don't see any catalyst that would like drive up the stock in the near future until the end of Q1, which is really good if you're planning to accumulate. Somebody wrote that I want it back in the threes. Has it ever been in the threes?
Yeah, briefly. It's been the high threes, not really the low threes. But I think I have some shares that I bought in the threes.
Are you kidding? My God, that's amazing.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm not sharing, am I? Good. Let's double check. You don't want people to get all these account numbers.
Yeah, I also...
You have more Rocket Lab than I do at this point, so I need to step my game up. I've been thinking about selling out of some other stocks that... it was a good day on Friday. I didn't check. I made about $1,000 or so. That's good.
On Rocket Lab?
No, $6,000. I mean, Rocket Lab. No, I lost a little bit. On
oh yeah,
Lab,
it was a red day.
I have. Yeah, it was just some buys here and there. So like December 30th of 2022, I bought 135 shares for $368. In March, I bought 439 shares for $387. Let's see. I bought shares in September, 300 shares for $400 flat. Sorry, $4 flat.
My God, amazing prices. Good job, Matt.
My initial cost basis isn't that good though. It's like $6, $6.23. So I'm still down on the stock, but I also have some in my Roth IRA, which is a tax advantage account. So I have another 800 shares in here. My cost base is actually worse in here, but yeah, I bought 54 shares in January for $397. December 30th for 13 shares for $369. So yeah, all over the place.
Yeah, cool. I mean, for me, it's funny because my dad was like, it's my dad who's sending this 30,000 to the broker account that we're gonna buy Rocket Lab with.
Yeah.
And I noticed that every time I buy, like the stock goes down after. And he was like, send the money quick, so it's out there. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know what it is. Like every time we bought, like it went down after. So I'm almost like, yeah, maybe I'll wait a month because I have this karma. But now maybe it will be like reverse, like the stock goes up and then we never see it in that range. But
yeah, I mean, I always think I think a lot about Baba is initiating a dividend. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I always think about like, should I take all the dividends that I get? Because just in this account here, you're looking at like 12,000-ish dividends a year, and I'm not even trying for dividends in this account anymore. It's like, so I'll be making 12,000. So it's like, to me, part of me is just like, instead of reinvesting it in some of those companies, so I just take a couple quarters worth and invest it into Rocket Lab.
I had a very interesting conversation with Arnie after Palantir Weekly. And we talked about like the difference between institutional investors and retail investors and position sizing, and we talked about that when you're a retail investor and you're actually studying the market, like it makes more sense to be very concentrated in your positions and not have so many, like he was saying that maybe like max 10 is that you can follow comfortably as a shareholder. And he's like, when you're an institutional investor, like you're handling a lot of clients' money, and then basically like it becomes risky for you to own like maybe more than 3% of something. But then he's like, if you're owning 3% of something, like what's your incentive to study and know about that company? And then he says, this is when you go into this like shallow Wall Street, like do a quick DCF. Okay, this is a buy, this is a not buy. Yeah. And he said that this is why the retail people get like a huge edge when you go concentrated. And then we started talking about that, like some people, like I have had some people who wrote on my Twitter who has like a $10,000 portfolio, and then they own like 30 shares, and then they write to me how they like trim this position, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like you're and we were talking about that. Yeah, let's say that these guys have 3% in Rocket Lab, and then Rocket Lab 10x's. I'm like, it's a 30% in their portfolio, and for all these research, like it doesn't give any life-changing anything, you know? So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like I just been kind of fortunate. Like I didn't buy Palantir so I could be on Palantir Weekly, right? And I didn't buy Rocket Lab so I could be with you here today. It just happens that those are two companies that I really am putting a lot of conviction into. And like you said, I mean, I've consolidated a lot of my positions down, and more and more so every single time. And I realized that the majority of my money now goes into the S&P 500. And that's just like where the reason being is because I just want to make sure that I'm keeping up with the market at that point. And then I can do somewhat larger outsized bets in something like a Palantir, in something like a Rocket Lab, in something like a Dutch Bros, where I'm able to put a little bit more money into, and then just keep the majority of my portfolio even keel. And then if I want to do some larger things that I think could turn into something pretty big, then I could put a $50,000 position into Amazon and Google, and hope that those do well and keep up with those, versus what I used to do before was just have a whole blanket of dividend stocks that would pay me, and it just would never work out. And then you end up just forgetting about certain companies for several months at a time. And it just was never good. So
I also want to say that I think that you're a little bit special because you have like a very good income, and we were also talking about this, that Alex Hormozy made a very good point, that if you're investing with very little money, when does your life change? Like if you lose the money, it's the same. Like you were broke before and you're broke after. But if you make a lot of money, then your life changes, right? But then if your portfolio is very big and you have a lot of money, like he said that, like Alex Hormozy said, like I have $100 million. Like what changes my life? If my 100 million becomes 200 million, he's like, a zero change for me. Like I can't, use that money anyways, right? But if the 100 million becomes zero, how does my life change? Mm-hmm. And then it's like a different viewpoint of like how you assess risk based on where you are with your money game.
Yeah.
And I think that like you're a bit special because you have, if I might say this, I don't know, maybe you can tell me to shut up, but because you have like a very high income, so even if you're would be investing in government bonds, by the time you're 60 you would anyways be like,
no, that's a very good point. And actually I want to build on that. I mean, I started at zero about 10 years ago in 2012 2013, and that's when I got my first job that really paid me anything where it would be worthwhile. Otherwise I was kind of just my parents were fortunate enough to pay for my college, so I never really had to do that, which very thankful for that. But everything else was on me, right? Like I moved out of, as soon as I graduated college, I moved out, paid for all my housing, everything basically. But I was fortunate to not have to pay student loans or anything like that, which really set me up. So I had that ability to start saving relatively easily, but I started at zero. I wasn't handed anything, in terms of like, here's $100,000 or $200,000 or anything like that. And a lot of it was, $500. I remember investing in SiriusXM. I had a $500 investment in SiriusXM. And like, I'd be at lunch, and the amount of money that it was up or down, I had a very similar reaction as like your daughter did. I'd be like eating my sandwich from the cafeteria that cost me $7, and I'm like, fucking SiriusXM, it is down $3 goddamn. Like, what am I gonna do? And like, at the time, $500 was a lot to me. And now the portfolio, sometimes will be down $15,000 in a day. At the worst I've seen, it's $40,000 in a day. And, and that was through just consistent contributions. But going back to what you just said with respect to like adding on to a portfolio, it was about 3-4 years ago, right before the pandemic, when I started to realize exactly what you were talking about. Had I continued down the path in which I was going, which is just steady dividend investing into Disney or Pepsi or Johnson & Johnson, it's like, I'll get there, right? But it won't truly change. It wouldn't truly change the way that I'd be living my life. I'd be the millionaire next door, which is great. And I think that to me, I'd rather stumble and fall and to continue to be the millionaire next door like I am today, after trying to build a portfolio over 10 years or so. But unless I made a change, I would never get to a point where I'd have an attempt to even have something like, and I don't want a yacht. I don't really vision myself flying private jets. But if I even wanted to have a chance at doing something like that, I needed to invest that way. And you're not going to get that way investing in Pepsi. You're not going to get that way investing in Johnson & Johnson. You have to look for something that makes outsized returns, like a Palantir or a Rocket Lab, or
and it also has to be a big enough position, because if you go like 0.2% of your portfolio.
Yep. So I always start with the end in mind a little bit, where I'm like, for example, a prime example of this, so that we're not beating it over the head, with Palantir and Rocket Lab. I said to myself, okay, I want Amazon to be a substantial position in my portfolio for the long term. I see that thing being, a several $1 trillion company in the future, potentially a $5 trillion company in the future, obviously with inflation, and then obviously with just how they're going to get close to $1 trillion in revenue coming up in the next several years. They're going to break easily $600-700 billion this year. They're going to be selling $1 trillion worth of merchandise here in the near future, believe it or not. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, well, if I were to sit there and choose what I think will be a several, let's just say $100,000 or $150,000 position, what would I choose? I would choose Amazon. So what do? I made sure that I had about $50,000 in Amazon, because I was like, I know it's going to 2 to 3x. So I want to be there for that. And that'll be $150,000 position. Same thing with Google. I said, okay, I want Google to also be the same, $150,000 position. What do I think it's going to do? I think it's going to 2 to 3x in the next 10 years or so. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have a $50,000 position in Google. Okay, cool. Palantir did the same thing. I said, I want to have a $150,000 position in Palantir. Could it go to $250,000 position? Of course, but I wanted to make sure. And I thought, 4,000 shares is enough. I want 5,000, but it just never got to a price point that I could do it. So I said that would be great. Rocket Lab's the same. Rocket Lab, I have about let's just see, $13,000 in right now. If it 10x's, it'd be a $100,000 position. I want to get it to 20,000. So if it 10x's, it gets to 250,000. But in reality,
I think you should get it to 100K position.
That would be the point where I think that it would be absolutely insane. Like, I think that would be absurd. That would be what I would want. But to me, with the risk associated with it right now, with how big my portfolio is, I just don't. I'm so risk averse in some of these things that I agree with you. If I were to say forget all the risks and think about only the upside opportunity, I would say yes. But I also want to make sure I don't lose. Lose a certain amount of money as well. But I'm with you. It's getting to a point where the downside is almost limited. Kind of like how Palantir, the same in Palantir. Like, I'm up 60% on Palantir. I'm up 30 grand. But I see that it's an $81,000 position for me right now, almost 82,000. And I think it could 2 to 3x, and if they start buying back shares, I could easily see it being a 4 or 5x for me. So I'm like, why would I sell that position when it could end up being a $300,000 position right now, right? And then Shell, I think Shell Shell's another position that's 50 grand for me.
Shell,
You
the
know,
oil company.
Yeah, I think that they're going to do really well in long term for renewables. So I think if anybody's going to do well, I think they're undervalued comparatively to Exxon and Chevron, personally, and that might persist. But I'm up about 75% on them. I have a few other companies that I want to sell out of and just put it into the S&P 500. Like I love Stag Industrial. That's a warehouse company, but I'm like, it's a small position. It's like I should just probably put that in the S&P. But that's the way I think about the portfolio. It got to a point where I was like, why do I have so much money spread across so many stocks? If that's the case, I should invest in the S&P 500. And then also I was just like, if I'm gonna invest in specific companies, it needs to be worthwhile enough where it makes a big enough of a move.
Cool. Thank you so much for this walkthrough, and I think that this is a good point to end this week's Rocket Lab Weekly, unless you have something else to say.
No,
No?
sorry, I went down a little rabbit hole at the end there, but
I think it's very educational because a lot of people must have this problem that are like us, who is bullish on Rocket Lab, like what position size should they take, and what I want the show, I don't want the show to be investment advice, but I do want it to give different viewpoints, that if you do this is what you can expect, if you do that, this is what you can expect. So I think it's value, and we the viewership went up in the end. It's very interesting. So,
oh really?
Yeah. So cool.
There you go.
So guys, thank you so much. There is some OGs in the chat that are always here for Rocket Lab Weekly. Thank you so much for your support, and God bless you, and see you next week.
Yeah,
Have a good week. Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Vince. Bye.
Bye.